found our projection is that 44% or 18.5 lane miles in the city would be good. We would have no lane miles that are deemed fair, but we would still have 23.4 lane miles poor, or 56%. So that's basically what it would be if we started following that today. If we rely on the income tax with a 5 mil reduction for street improvements, by 2030, we project that we would have 31.6 lane miles in good condition, or 77% of the system would be in good condition. 10.3 miles would still be in poor condition. It's safe to say by 2034, I would feel very confident that we would be very close to that 100% good condition. We might have some go into fair, but with the revenue we have, we would be able to also maintain those roads as they deteriorate over time. You go to the next slide. So people probably want to know how much this will cost the residential homeowner. First thing I want you to do, I'll go into this in a second, the website. The Firefox, okay. This is the City of Lowell's website. We put a calculator in place so residents and non-residents could determine what their property tax would be, what their proposed income tax would be. You would just need your state tax form that you fill out, or your W-2 forms. You would have your adjusted gross income, your number of deductions. So if you have a family of 4, it would be 4 deductions, or be individual. And then if you had 4 exemptions, I'm sorry, and then the deductions we talked about earlier. Every person is going to be different because every person has a different taxable value for their home and a different income level. Everyone has different income levels. You can go to this site and all you have to do is enter your information in that area is highlighted yellow if you're a city resident, and you will get what you're going to pay. And we even break it down by a bi-weekly pay or a weekly pay. So why don't you just type in for amount of it, just say $100,000. Just say 4 exemptions, and just put $3,500 in deductions. We got to go back to the one that says 4 in the yellow. So that's your taxable income. It shows what your income tax would be with the 1%, and it breaks it down. Now also, you can also show how much your property tax will be reduced. Let's just say your taxable value of your home is $100,000 for simplistic purposes. So you would have a $500 reduction in your property taxes annually. So the net effect to your taxes as they are today would be $441. Where with if you added 12 mils to that, your property taxes would be significantly higher. Go back to the PowerPoint, please. So, okay. So, try to make this as simple as we could. How much will the road improvements cost? The easiest way to use it is use a census estimate. U.S. Census provides annual estimates for median home value, income, many different demographics throughout every city, township, village in the United States. So, in 2017, the median home value in the city of Lowell was $113,800. If that home was bought today, the taxable value of that home would be set in half at $56,900. In the first year that person pays property taxes, they would pay the city $893.33 in their property tax. That's not your whole tax bill. That's just the city's portion of it. Doesn't include schools, doesn't include county, John Wall Zoo, all of that. 12 additional mills to this property would cost the homeowner an additional $682.80 in the first tax year. How much will the road improvement cost? So let's talk about the income tax component to this. Census estimate for median income for a Lowell City resident in 2017 was $61,813. This individual, let's just say one exemption, would have a $600 exemption when they filed. Let's just say they had no deductions. The reduction of property tax by 5 mils, based off that median homeowner's value of $113,000 that I mentioned, they would be reduced by $284.50. This person's 1% income tax would be $612.13. The increase in taxes for this individual would be $327.63 per year, or $6.30 per week. Like I said, everyone is different, everyone has different situations, but we try to make it as simple as we can, and there's a pretty good tool on the website that you can use and try and give you an accurate portrayal of your situation. Go to the next slide. I'm going to turn this over to Dan Zarnacki. He's going to start talking to you about our infrastructure system and get to you in more detail on that.
Mike. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. A lot of information here, and I'm going to throw out a lot more information and numbers and try to explain where we're at with our street system here itself. MDOT puts together lots of information that we can utilize to figure out what things cost, just to help us make sure we're in the ballpark with how things happen. They throw out some numbers there for bridges and roads and maintenance and such. And when you look at these numbers, and you look at the numbers that the city of Lowell has been looking at, millions of dollars for a mile of street, 7 blocks, about a half a mile. We talked about $500,000 for that through Mike's presentation, and the numbers do come and show that. I could talk about these other projects like bridges, how MDOT is pretty darn close to these numbers. And as far as winter maintenance goes, I went and checked last year's budget, fiscal year 18. The city spent, on average, $3,000 a lane mile for winter maintenance. We spent $2,937.50 a mile for winter maintenance. So again, these numbers are pretty close. So when we start looking at numbers, we feel pretty confident that unfortunately this expensive road work is, the numbers we use are pretty close to being accurate. As we move along, current street funding, as Mike explained, we get our dollars through Act 51, which are gas tax monies with the money we pay for gas at the pump, plus some vehicle registration fees. And you think about it, cars we buy nowadays get better gas mileage. Some don't even use fuel like that. And the Act 51 dollars are stretching further than they had in the past. We get, per dollar-wise, better money back in the earlier years than we are now. Although we're getting more money now, things cost a lot more now as well. Again, our street system is divided into over 20 miles of centerline streets. So remember, we have to do both centerline street down the middle of the road. We all have 2 lanes on every street. Some streets have 3 when you start putting in the center turn lane to think about. I went back and looked at the budgets and found in 2017 the city received a little over $320,000 from the state through Act 51 for roads. And in turn, that same year, the city spent over $700,000 on right-of-way activities, about $300,000 on routine maintenance, and another $400,000 on capital projects. I think Mike already explained what most of those were. So as you look at them, yeah, we saved about $20,000 in our routine maintenance that could go towards streets. Not a whole lot of money there. And the other difference, about $400,000, as Mike explained, was made up utilizing the general fund monies, some DDA and some other grant and other fundings to help offset that difference. As we move along, they said the fund from the state covers our street repairs, anything we do in the road, fixing the curves, putting patch down for potholes, making repairs, winter maintenance, plowing, putting the salt down, traffic control, the traffic lights that have to be maintained here, the electricity for that, the signs and such, painting of the striping of the streets and things like that. That all goes into those maintenance items. As you can see, in 17 we had $20,000 left over after all that was done. As Mike mentioned, there's certain streets, G, Foreman, Bowes, that are on the Federal National Functional Classification Transportation Map, fancy long name saying it's a major street that the feds will allow us to use some of their dollars for through the TIP program, Transportation Improvement Program. But something to keep in mind with that is a highly competitive pile of money that is in Kent County that we fight with, or we work with the other communities in Kent County to try to obtain the city of Lowell's fair share to do our streets. The city's been pretty good to get dollars for that, but as you saw in Mike's slide of the previous work, that was several years ago on many of those streets, and that helped do what was done to them. And as time moves on, those streets are going to fall into disrepair. We're going to need some dollars again that we'll have to go back to these pots for and try to have those dollars to help offset the local dollars to do our streets. So as you can see, remaining streets need some improvement funding from other sources. Earlier this year in July, I met with the chairman of the Michigan House Transportation Committee, Jack O'Malley. He's a Republican, and they have their own plan for doing streets. As you recall, Mike talked about the governor's plan, which would net us an extra $22,000 for our streets. The chairman of the House, when I talked to him, we had a presentation on what their plans are. And again, they talk great for the federal or the state highways and the major roads like that for you and I for going down from one community to another. But they don't talk about the local streets, from our house to those major streets. So I went up and personally asked them, what are we doing with the local roads? We know what the governor's doing. What's the Republicans want to do? His answer to me was, you have to Google it. I can't tell you have to Google it. I thought, well, that's kind of strange. So I Googled it that day, and I couldn't find anything. I Googled it today. Their plan is to allow us to utilize our local and major street funds, commingle them, like if we do our asset management plan, and use them on our streets as we see fit, because there are roads we know what we need to do. Sounds great, but it kind of is what we're already doing, and there weren't any dollar amounts added to that. So again, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we've got any outside help coming to help us with this situation. And as you go through other communities, you can see Lowell isn't the only one with that situation. If you look at our budgets for the past 3 years, again, I just pulled them out and seen what the dollars were. The city has spent approximately $859,000 to cover additional expenses for roads for the improvement portions, the street reconstructions and things of that nature. Those funds coming from general fund dollars, DDA funds, grants, and then the money that's banked for streets to do those type of things. So you can see that's not very sustainable when you start looking at how we're going to do these things. So getting away from the dollar portion to the streets themselves, we've evaluated the streets. They've done that in the last few years. It's something we do annually, and we look at the roads, and you're going to say, well, that's pretty easy to do. Just drive down them. It's pretty easy to see what needs to be fixed and what doesn't. Well, there's a program called Taser, Pavement Surface Evaluation Rating, Mike mentioned. It has a 1 to 10 scale. It's statewide use. It's really nationwide use that does this, and it gives you good ideas as to what you're looking at and what kind of repairs you need to do. There's a chart that comes from the Taser program. Next slide, please. That talks about what a street that surfaces a 10. Now, it's a brand new street, Broadway. You can go down through there and see that. An 8, we got some that they starting to have some issues like Jefferson. There's a couple cracks, not much. Washington. That would fall under, I believe, about a 2.
I think so.
It's and again, it's a subjective visual program to go down and take a look at these things. So this program tells us some of the things we need to be looking at doing to our system to make the improvements for the streets themselves. So we've taken that, our engineers have taken that and put together a map for us that shows our good, fair, and poor streets. As you can probably figure, red's the poor, the oranges and the yellows are the fair, and then the upper greens and the blues basically are the good ones. The greens also fall into the fair category. So reds and oranges are poor, yellows and greens are fair, and the blues are good. And if you remember the previous information, about 91% of our streets fall into the other than blue category. They need work. And again, it's simple to see just by driving around. So just to give you just a few more examples here of that, I've taken some pictures of some of the roads. And again, Broadway down there behind King Milling, that was just recently done, that would be a 10. Really good shape. And there's nothing wrong with it. It does get a lot of heavy truck traffic, I've noticed, going to King Milling. The next slide shows Donna Street. Again, that falls into about 8. It's starting to show its wear, but it's still in pretty good shape. And the same with Center. It's starting to show some cracks in Center. Things like Donna and Center here, we've got programs that can keep these roads in good condition that needs to be considered in our street program itself. Division Street is now starting to fall into a 4 rating. That, as you can see, there's a lot of cracking. There's some visual, notice visually that there's been some repairs done trying to seal the cracks. But if you don't seal the cracks, I mean, the worst thing for a road is water. Once the water gets into the pavement and under the pavement, our wonderful Michigan weather with the freeze-thaw cycle just starts causing havoc to that. And then when you roll across with a heavy piece of equipment or a truck or a car, snowplow, that's when you start getting your potholes. I can give you all sorts of information on that if you're interested, how those are formed. But in the end, it basically boils down to water and freezing and thawing and just falling into disrepair. As you can see with Amity, I mean, there's a lot of streets that look like Amity that are cracked and checked and basically worn out. So we look at what we can do for all of our streets to put together a street asset management plan. And again, the obvious is the best option for the repairs, depending on how much money you have and what you need to do to the road. So there's a thing called the mix of fixes that we try to do that take into account just the maintenance end of it, the rehabilitation end of it, and the reconstruction alternatives that we have out there. And as you look at this street plan that we have here, you look at it and you say, well, there's a lot to do on there. It's not all reconstruction, it's not all, it's the whole mix of everything that we can do to help keep our street system in the best condition that we can keep it in. And because of all these different options that we have, to help explain how that works out, there's a nice graph provided by Taser that talks about street pavement condition over time. And to me, it kind of looks like a bunch of shark fins coming out of the water, if you will. But that's just the way it kind of works out. As it starts at the beginning of time, the street's new, and over time it curved, starts, and it kind of goes into disrepair. But if you can perform some preventative maintenance to it, fix the cracks, patch the potholes, that surface quality goes back up, and then you can extend the useful life of that pavement out further till you get to the point where maybe you need to do a milling and resurfacing, and again, it brings it up in the rehabilitation and gives you even more time. As you can see, as time goes on, that life expectancy of the road extends out there. You can see some of these on roads that have been done in other communities where they do a lot of the pavement preventative maintenance. You get a lot of little shark fins coming up and going down, and extends that useful life even further out there. And those are the type of things that we looked at in putting together a street plan to go with all the other plans to come up with a infrastructure maintenance program. Road soft modeling is a computer program that helps us with that. It takes all this information about the roads, all this information about what we can do to them, the costs involved, and it comes out with a computer printout that talks about a program that talks about those types of repairs for the road surface. Well, that's all fine and dandy on the road, but again, we have infrastructure improvements that need to be taken into account as well. So as Mike mentioned, we had the water reliability study a few years back. I have a map over there that shows all the water repairs that need to be done. So that's another piece of the puzzle. The solid grant program that is almost done, they gave me some prints on that as well that shows sanitary and stormwater work that needs to be done. A couple more parts of the puzzle. And we've taken all those different pieces and parts and tried to come up with an infrastructure maintenance program that is both practical, doable, and covers everything that needs to be done. Again, we know the dollar puzzle part of it, we know the water part of it, the sewers part of it, and now the street part of it. And we've taken all that information, and when you look at our Taser road rating page, look at a couple, one more, that talks about, one more please, that talks about our streets, and again, our reds and orange and yellows, and taking those and combining a plan together We looked at all the different options that are out there to come up with an infrastructure maintenance plan that, again, is both practical, doable, and covers everything that we can get covered in a year's time. And we come up with this map here that shows yearly with some of the ideas of what we want to do. If you can go to the next slide, please. And you look at that, it says a 12-year plan, and that's only because it needs to be fine-tuned more. This is a 15-year program that we're looking at, but in looking at the infrastructure and looking at the roads, it still needs to be tweaked with the dollars that we have available. And if you look at this, 2021 would be the first year of the income tax for the money that we could utilize. And we have a purple area for that, that's in the Amity Lincoln. There's water main sewer part work that needs to be done in through that area. And quite frankly, that was the area that fit into the dollar amount as well. And if you look at that closely, you'll notice that Jefferson Street's on there for 21 as well. Again, this is a mix of fixes. It's not just reconstruction, it's also sealing the roads that we have there. That's a road that was done a few years back. We want to make sure it stays in as best condition as we can. Gets back into that little chart showing the little shark fins, trying to seal those cracks so that we can get that life expectancy of that road to be extended out. And then there's other reasons for that too. As we look along, this plan was put together to take care of neighborhoods. Someone says, well, can't we just do a street in every neighborhood every year so that everybody gets a little bit? Well, yes, that is an option that could be done. But now you're extending out the mess in every neighborhood every year. My thinking has always been, let's get in, let's do a neighborhood. Construction's dirty, dusty, noisy, very inconvenient for the people that live there. Imagine the inconvenience when you're just driving through a construction zone. Imagine now living in there. I can tell you some stories. Mike can probably remember the box of dust I received one day from a person that, again, unfortunately that's what happens. So my thought has always been try to take care of your neighborhood. So again, the Amity Lincoln the first year, 21, 22, as Mike mentioned earlier, we're hoping to get some funds for that. So if we get those Monroe dollars, that would play into this program and help with the dollar aspect of this puzzle of trying to pull everything together. Also, when you do neighborhoods like this, you have a better control over the construction traffic to utilize those roads that are already in poor condition and stay off the roads that are in good condition, and we can work our way, again, piecing these puzzles together through the neighborhoods. So now we have our dollars, we have our infrastructure, and we have our underground infrastructure, and we have our streets, and trying to piece all those together. And that's where we've put together a program, again, it's a doable program that would work with all the information we have today. And with that said, you look at this and you look at 2032, probably that work in that year would change because of the times change. There's a lot of things we don't have control over that could change, that could affect the work we have to do. Costs keep going up, and we don't know how much costs are going to go up in 10 years. But we can take an estimate to it based on with the past. But again, if the state finally does come through with a program to get dollars somewhere, who knows what kind of effect that might have on us, not just us, but on contractors. There's only so many contractors that do this work. There's only so much material that's made every year. Those all play into it that we have to be cognizant of. It might not affect us, but we should be aware of that as we're moving forward as well. And then through 10 years, we've done studies on our infrastructure underground, but in 10 years something could change and we might have to reevaluate where we're working to take care of a problem that might have cropped up. The way these capital improvement plans work, we make our plan, here it is. Every year it gets reviewed. It needs to be reviewed with all the changes, all the different aspects that are being looked at, make sure we're still on track for what we had planned. So that's something that would take place every year to help keep the program in the position that we want it to be moving forward. And again, this isn't a program just go out and let's repave the streets, fix the underground, walk away. This is a program that would be sustainable into the future as well. So once the streets get into the upper level of being in fair and good condition, is to keep them that way by doing the preventative and routine maintenance that needs to be taking place to keep those in there and to keep those shark fins small and towards the upper end of the chart instead of falling to the bottom. So going through all that, putting our plan together, again, you're gonna look at that and say, well, my street's a late year. There's probably a reason for that. And I'll be happy to explain the thought process behind all this individually for those that might have that concern, but trying to get the whole town taken care of over time, utilizing the dollars that we hope to receive like Monroe, keeping the roads that are in good condition like Broadway and Bowes in those good conditions, and Jefferson, and working our way through our community to take care of our entire infrastructure as we move along. Again, as we move along here, just finish up here, again, give you ideas what we're talking about. Crack sealing, you get out there and you seal it, and it puts those black squiggly lines. Again, the first line of defense is keeping that water out of the pavement. And this is very effective in doing that. Another effective program that can be done is if you drove up to the highway recently, you've seen they put tar and stone and some more stuff down. That's chip sealing, and that does work well too to extend the useful life of that surface pavement. But there's also other rehabilitation things such as milling off just the top bit of asphalt and resurfacing it again, or taking all that asphalt out, which is a lot of what we'd be doing in Lowell, and replacing it, taking care of the gravel that's underneath it, and then resealing it with either an overlay or full depth paving. And then finally, the all-important reconstruction where you take everything out, including the utilities underground, and replacing things and putting things back together as brand new. One of the, a couple notes with all this too is the program for the infrastructure isn't just the city, water and sewer. When you do programs like this, we get a hold of all the other utilities and such that are in the right of way, phone lines and cable lines and things like that. Make sure those entities that own those are keeping their utilities up to the standard that they need to be, so they're not coming back and tearing up our roads as well. The last thing any of us want to do is resurface a road and then a year or less go out there and have a problem that needs to be maintained and dig up the road and do work with that. So we'd be working with those utilities to make sure theirs equipment is taken care of prior as well. So that's another piece of the puzzle that, well, that's not our cost, that is our concern to make sure that these things take place. And again, as I said, this is a plan that needs to be reviewed annually, usually this time of year, so we can start planning for the next year, the next 2 years, because that's how long these things take time to get the planning out there, especially when you have infrastructure underneath that needs to be replaced, water mains, sewer lines. There's a big, long permitting process. There's a lot of design work and things of that nature. And then once that all gets done, having the time to make sure you have a good plan in place so that this all can get put in with the least amount of disruptions possible. Because there's some areas that, around schools, it's kind of hard to work during the school year. So your window of opportunity narrows down even more than what we have here in Michigan with the winter and such. But that's our presentation. There's just a couple of things I just want to follow up on. As Mike stated when this started, this is an informational meeting. Not telling anybody how to vote. It's your decision to make. This is just one option that was presented out there. There's other options that I've seen in other places. One option that could be done is a special assessment where the street itself, the people that live on it, you assess what the work is on the street, and usually it goes by a foot frontage basis as to what the cost is divided up, and that's what you pay for to fix your street, if that's what you so choose. Another option that you see in other communities a lot is a dedicated millage. As Mike mentioned, 12.7 mills is what it would take to do our roads. That is spread out amongst everybody in town. You think of special assessment, you only pay for what's in front of your house, your property, I mean. Millage, you help everybody with it equally, again, based on your property values. This option here, utilize income tax that, again, it takes into account what the residents are doing, but it also takes into account people that aren't residents, people that don't live in town. They're going to be paying towards this too to help offset the cost for the residents. And then there's the fourth option, is what the city's been doing, is as I call it, the slow go. Do what you can with what we have, and that's what the other option is we continue doing. So there are options out there. This is just the one that's on the table today that hopefully you get your information and get the facts, and then make your decision based on the facts and decide what you think is best for you and for your community. So that's what I have. I don't know if Mike has anything to finish up with, or Dick.
So that is, in essence, our presentation that we're preparing the voters. At this time, we're open to take any questions you might have.
I got one.
Sure.
I'm Chuck Thomas, I'm president and part owner of Metric Manufacturing. And if we're going to do this, we're going to put it up to a vote. Wouldn't it be fair to allow the employees to vote on this too, rather than just residents? It just seems like this is taxation with no representation whatsoever. Who wouldn't vote for having somebody else pay your taxes?
Dick, can you explain the legality to that?
Yeah, you have to be a resident of the city in order to vote on any city proposal, by law, by state law.
How does this work for a business?
In an example, take a look at Grand Rapids. There are many people that work in Grand Rapids that don't live in Grand Rapids. None of those people had an opportunity to vote on the income tax that the city of Grand Rapids levied. And that's the same with the city of Walker, city of Wyoming,
Portland, Iowa.
or Andrews.
What about Metric? What would Metric be assessed? 1%?
You would pay based on your adjusted gross income, you would pay 1%.
What would you adjust out of it?
What you normally do for state income tax, probably, and federal. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, but it'd be pretty much similar to what your adjusted gross income is for federal and state income tax.
Yes.
I'm Marilyn Bramham. I live 280 River, Virginia. I'm not sure if it was a resolution 2419 that says City Council intends to apply these funds towards the income tax funds towards the street repair. Why did they not say the city shall apply these funds?
That's another legal question.
I mean, people intend to do lots of things, and I've seen projects that the city council has said they will support, and then the following year, there was no appropriation in the budget, no allowance in the budget to accomplish it, so that the project was just stopped.
Yeah, I can provide an explanation, Ms. Graham, for that. The reason why the word intend was in there is because it isn't an income tax yet. And so they can only intend to do something because they can't do it if, in fact, the proposal isn't passed. I can assure you, though, based on the discussion, that if the income tax were passed, the city council would say, we shall spend that money for road repair.
Okay, because I know when they
It's a-
wanted to
but it's
start
just
the
a-
lottery, they did the same thing, those funds
Yeah.
are supposed to go to education and nothing else.
So again, it just had to be intend because the millage isn't in effect yet.
So why can't the language in the proposal be changed to say, if this passes, the city will?
In what proposal?
If the income tax proposal passes,
They could do that. They could do that.
so
Sure.
the proposal language would change.
They could do that. They could say that if the income tax proposal were
Passes,
passed,
the city will.
will, yeah. And that's a good suggestion.
I can tell you this. We sat up here and we directed that same question to Dick. And we were very adamant that if this passes, this money only goes to street repairs and improvements, and that was it. And Dick started to write, do it, but like he said, we haven't passed it, so we can't put in there, we will, because we haven't gotten it approved yet. And
Can the ballot proposal be changed to say, if it passes, the city shall do this?
So it's not part of the ballot proposal, it's part of the resolution. The resolution can be changed.
Yeah, resolution can be changed to pass.
the point they're getting at, though, is that it might not pass unless people see that language changed.
Yeah, that's my feeling.
Basically it. There's a certain level of distrust that the money's going to be used
Fair.
appropriately.
I mean, we could bring it back to council, I guess, for the next meeting.
It's in our interest to get that
Yeah,
changed.
we could bring it back to council.
As Councilman Chambers said, that clearly, I don't want to use the word intent, but it clearly is not the intent of the city council. The intent of the city council is if this passes, it shall be used for road improvement.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I'm Karen Foley, I live on Washington Street,
Hi.
which is looking like a third world country.
I agree.
As long as it is. But you know that. All right, so my question is this, I'm a little worried about Lowell's growth and development, and I wondered if there had been any study done to determine what happens to a small city like this with about 40,000 residents and few employers that has a city income tax. What does that do to our growth, to our real estate, to our, what keeps people from saying, no way, I'm not going to live in a city that has this much trouble with their roads? And
If you look at a city like Portland, Portland is almost demographically identical to us. They have the same situation. Their downtown is pretty nice. They have about the same population we do. Their income tax has been in place since the 70s, and it's really never been a detriment to them.
okay.
I mean, to say we did a research, I mean, we can just look at, really for us, the best example is Portland. They're the perfect example because they're almost identical to us to everything. And matter of fact, this talk about the income tax came about before I even came here. Before I came here, the city council at the time, they went to Portland for a mayor exchange. And that's how this all started, because Portland did it. And it worked for them. And they've been actually had a pretty robust street improvement plan. And that's how this really started.
Since the 70s, we have not.
Correct.
That's my other comment.
Right.
Thank you for finally looking at this, because I think we're in a pretty sad situation.
Can I say something to
Sure.
that as well? You're right, this Lowell, it's been a long time, but it's not just Lowell. You can go all over the state and see, roads get built. It's kind of like you build your house, put your roof on, man, don't worry about it again until you have a problem. That's what people do with roads. And it's not just here, it's everywhere, just about in Michigan. But there's communities out there, I'm thinking like Milford, they passed a millage to do their roads. It's not as aggressive as
A
this.
dedicated millage.
A dedicated millage for roads that they utilize with their utility funds to do basically the same idea as what we're doing, proposing here. It's just, I don't think, in Milford, I don't know if you've been there, it's a pretty full community just like Lowell. There's not a whole lot of available growth, but boy, it's a hopping, busy. People are trying to be there all the time and trying to squeeze another house in there. It's a nice, growing community as much as they can, and and knowing the people I know there that work there and live there, there isn't an issue with keeping people from coming there if there's something for them to, and I think part of it is knowing it's being taken care of.
But it's a millage and not a city.
It's a village, though, it's not an
Right.
income tax, so it's just the people in town that are paying for that. And it's 6, I believe, mills or something like that for their town.
I know Brighton-
Same thing is close to this.
If you go like, we both came from the east side of the street. We can both attest to you that some of the streets in Fenton, where we came from, our streets are nothing compared to some of those. Those streets are bad. And Fenton's a pretty nice growing area. It's the same issue. I was in Hillsdale back in the spring, and I was going to Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College, very well-known, very affluent university, very affluent community. You go through some of those streets, they don't have a street millage. Those streets are just as bad, if not as worse as ours. I couldn't believe what I saw when I was there. This isn't us alone. I believe there's 636 road levies statewide, whether it's an income tax or a millage. So the cities that have taken this on and addressed it, they've moved forward. They've been able to address their system. The cities that haven't addressed this, they're like us. And there's a lot of cities that haven't, and there's a lot of cities that have.
again, it's a huge puzzle, it piece everything together. Like say Washington Street, well, it's not one of the first ones, again, it's not one of the last, but there's a lot to that puzzle to get to that point. And first one's the dollars, the other is all the underground that needs to be done, and then trying to piece it so we can move through the community in a basis where we keep moving forward. It's kind of tough to put that together, but I think with us, it's a very doable and manageable. It's a lot of work. There'd be a mess in certain areas, and again, construction's a mess and it's inconvenient, but I think in the end, once that part is done, then the next phase is to make sure it stays that way. And this, like, the thinking of it's then, don't worry about it anymore, is lost thinking. We don't do that anymore. That's where this mix of fixes, if you will. It's more than just wait for it to fall apart and resurface it. There's other things that need to be done, the sealing of the cracks, the putting down some stone or some other sort of micro surfacing to keep that pavement in the best condition as it can, as long as you can, so that this problem doesn't crop up again in 20, 30 years when pavement is worn out like it is on many streets here. So that's the whole idea of this whole program.
Sharon?
Yeah, when you're talking about the demographics and we're comparing it to Portland, I know from working at the school, we have a lot of at-risk students, free reduced lunch, there's a huge percentage. Does Portland have senior homes? Do they have trailer parks? Do they have a large portion of the children that go? I mean, I'm concerned about the people that,
Sure.
$400 to some people is nothing, an average of $400 is what you said, but to some people, it might mean more food stamps, they have to move out. I know that there's something built in supposedly if you're low income, but there's a lot of renters in this town, and there's a lot of people underage. I mean, I work at the From, we just gave away 400 backpacks.
Right.
Because there are people that can't afford school supplies.
10.5%.
It's huge. And
Our
at-risk kids,
population.
it's like
Yeah.
75% of the
I
children.
mean,
Great majority
I
of
don't-
the age of 60.
I'll be honest, I don't know all their demographics off the top of my head,
Okay.
but they're very, I mean, I know they're very similar
I
to
mean,
me. My wife works in Ionia County, and
Okay.
she works for the schools in Ionia, and Ionia is another place that isn't, they're low to moderate, I mean, majority of their kids are on reduced lunch. They still have income tax, and they have the same issues we do, but they've also been able, but because of the income tax, they've been able to address a lot of their infrastructure needs. Go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say, city-data.com, you can look up a lot of demographics and compare, and it has an awful lot of information. I just wanted to add a little bit that we also work a lot in the state of Ohio. We actually have more customers down there than we do here in Michigan. And in Ohio, there's 565 cities and municipalities and villages that have an income tax down there. When we drive back and forth, Lisa and I in particular, we do this when we go over the state line because the roads are so nice all over down there.
And they don't use
Very
property
nice.
tax for municipalities in
Property
Ohio.
Two in Michigan,
Do you?
but to fly over them.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, it is very nice, and, you know,
Yeah.
all of the little cities, all the little villages, I'm from Eaton Rapids myself, so we're along the same thing, the lunch programs, we're underneath a lot of that. So, but, you know, all of the little cities down there, they're nice. I'm not saying all the buildings are populated, of course, but like any other small town. But everything, the streets, things are in good shape. And it makes a heck of a difference.
It's something to remember, in Ohio, their tax structure for municipalities is totally different than cities. Cities in Ohio do not get property tax. They rely solely on income tax and local sales tax, in addition to the state sales tax. Those cities can actually levy an income tax and a local sales tax. We can't levy a local sales tax. All we can do is rely on property tax, which is restricted through Proposal A and the Headley Amendment, and income tax. Those are our only two options. Yes? Sure.
I'm Kathy, I was going to live on Shepherd Drive. There was a slide that showed the income tax minus the 5 mils, plus minus the administrative cost, and then that would be actually what the amount would be
Correct.
for the road.
Correct.
Have you figured out what the difference would be if there was no income tax and you kept the 5 mils in there from the property tax? I mean, what is the difference for, I
Oh,
know that
you
your
mean-
calculator on the,
Yeah, we didn't take it, we reduced the reason the property tax was reduced 5 mils is because the millage rate is 15.7 mils. We felt that was that offset we felt that offset would help the situation and then help the road situation
it
better
will,
than.
but I'm trying to figure out how much are you gaining? Because you're giving back 5, but you're taking 1%. So what is the difference? What is it that you're ultimately gaining? And I tried to figure it out from that slide and I couldn't.
Well,
You know what I, do you know what I'm trying to ask?
I know what you, yeah, I know
Okay.
exactly. Let me see if we can get the slide up there.
I think it was
Work on it.
called it was the one after difference in revenue growth.
Yeah.
And
Go-
I think
go
it was
for,
5 columns.
What's left
not
for
that one.
streets? Go for what's left for streets.
Yeah,
Keep
it was
going.
way before that. It was like a 4 or 5 column slide.
Yeah, it's a couple more slides now. I think it's like 25 or 26. There you go, 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So has this same slide been done without the income tax and without the 5 mil reduction? So what amount of money do you get with just the normal property tax without?
Okay,
That's where we're at now.
right, so,
But where are
Right.
we? I mean, and there were dozens of slides before that with gas tax and property tax.
Mhm.
And I wondered what that total amount was altogether. It was all very piecemeal. And I know that you know where all this money comes from for the roads, but if there was one number,
There's a slide actually on that also.
yeah.
I know I'm trying to ask.
No, yeah, I understand.
You see, the 5 mil reduction, as you know, that would not be available for roads because that needs to be
Covering the general
fund
services.
expenses. Yeah.
So I guess what you're saying is, if you didn't have the income tax, and you just took those dollar amounts for streets, you'd have to look at the first year. You're probably about an additional 7.7 mils. But that's probably about right, maybe 7.5 mils, somewhere around there. But you gotta remember, once you dedicate that millage, it's restricted, it can only go the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. So that 777, or that 7.5 mils, whatever, if that's what you did, it's always gonna be that amount, or near that amount. It's gonna go up a little bit over time. It's not gonna go up as fast as what would be projected through an income tax, because
Go to the chart, improving streets with gas tax plus 180K general fund transfer.
Right.
I think that's the comparison.
yeah.
So if you go, you can find that, chief.
I'm working on it.
That one,
It's the other way.
That one?
I'm just
26.
trying to calculate in my head
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is the,
Yeah.
So go back,